You're listening to the Catholic Men of America podcast. Catholic Men of America is a professional business fraternity for Catholic men, and membership is free. Join us at CatholicMenofAmerica.com, and you'll benefit from networking and mentorship opportunities, find better employment, learn how to grow your business more quickly, and grow in virtue. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Food is more than just taste. It's also about the love of the people cooking in the kitchen. Here at Catholic Men of America, we're proud to introduce you to Fatherdoms.com. Fatherdoms.com is named for Father Dominic Roscioli, a priest of the Diocese of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. His 93-year-old mother, Angie, is famous in her neighborhood of Kenosha, Wisconsin, for the heavenly pasta sauce she makes, inspired by a union of the best recipes from Calabria and La Marca, Italy. This pasta sauce is famous in Catholic circles in the Milwaukee area, including with a few archbishops, and boasts an authentic, fresh Italian flavor thanks to the finest ingredients chosen by Angie herself. The recipe is still a family secret, but the sauce is now available online. Go to fatherdoms.com right now and get a can of Mom's pasta sauce today. That's Father, F-A-T-H-E-R, Doms, D-O-M-S.com. Hi, this is JeffCassman with the Catholic Men of America, and today on the podcast, I'm proud to welcome Steve Hemler. Steve is president of the Catholic Apologetics Institute of North America, known as CANA. He is the author of 3 books, The Reality of God, The Layman's Guide to Scientific Evidence for the Creator, Search No More, The Keys to Truth and Happiness, and Catholic Stories of Faith and Hope, How God Brings Good Out of Suffering. All these books are published by TAN Books. Steve has a Master of Pastoral Studies degree from the Loyola University of Chicago, as well as a bachelor's and master's degree in Civil and Structural Engineering from Virginia Tech. He has been actively involved in adolescent and adult religious education for over 30 years. After a 33-year professional engineering career, including 13 years in Saudi Arabia, Steve took early retirement in 2011 to follow a calling to serve God and the church full-time. Steve and his wife Linda have been married for 43 years and have 3 adult children. They live in Culpeper, Virginia, and are active at Precious Blood Catholic Church, where Steve serves as the coordinator of adult faith formation. Hi, this is JeffCassman with Catholic Men of America, coming to you today with another fantastic guest in our podcast series. I want to introduce Steve Hemler of the Catholic Apologetics Institute of North America. Steve, welcome.
Hello, Jeff. Good to be here.
Glad to have you. So you've got some fascinating things to share with us today. I'm looking forward to this conversation. But first, tell us a little bit about yourself, your childhood, your background in academics, your family, that sort of thing.
Yes, Jeff. I was born in Hampton, Virginia, and raised in Hampton, and went to Virginia Tech, graduated with a degree in engineering, civil engineering, structural engineering, and then got married and moved to Houston. And then we came back, and my wife finished her bachelor's, and I got a master's in engineering at Virginia Tech, and then worked in Tennessee, Kingsport, Tennessee, for 17 years. And then we moved to, of all places, Saudi Arabia, our whole family. We have 3 children. And when in 1998, we moved to Saudi Arabia. I worked for the oil company as a safety engineer. It was a wonderful job. We had a wonderful lifestyle, a lot of traveling. We had Mass, we had CCD, we had the bishop came in for confirmation. People are very surprised. But I lived in Dhahran, and we have been married for 43 years, and we have 1 grandson now, with another child on the way. So our second son and his wife, and they are going to do the surprise thing. They're not having a gender reveal party, and so we don't know if it's a boy or a girl. This is the old way to do it. So anyway, while we were over in first in Tennessee, my wife and I did a lot of CCD confirmation classes for years. And then when we were in Saudi Arabia, we did the same, taught 8th grade and 9th grade students there. And one thing that Aramco, Saudi Aramco, the oil company, did was pay to send your kids anywhere in the world they wanted to go to boarding school. And so we, the parish, the priests, and the parents and I, we decided that we needed to help equip them for challenges to their faith and morals that they were going to face leaving their parents and family at such a young age. So as the last year of our confirmation program, we developed what we called faith challenges and moral challenges. And these addressed big questions, faith, how do you know God exists? Evolution, Jesus' divinity and resurrection, why go to church? What about suffering? All these big questions. And then in morals, we looked at, the typical things: premarital sex, abortion, lying, stealing, drinking, this sort of thing. And it was very successful. We started doing these faith challenges presentations with the adults there in the community, and very well attended, very well received. These are PowerPoint and video-based presentations given live. And I was asked to start doing them down in Dubai at our, it's called a vicariate, at our vicariate workshop conference. Every year they had a catechetical conference. And so for, I think, 7 years, I gave these presentations down there, and it was standing room only. And it really felt like it was meeting a need bigger than just students going off to boarding school. As you know, today, young people especially, but everyone is facing challenges to our faith. The scientific community is rumored to have, disproven God's existence. And a lot of young people are confused when they learn about evolution. If God didn't have anything to do with the development of our, human beings, then why do we need God? And so there's a lot of questions: suffering, like I mentioned, Jesus' divinity and resurrection. Why go to church? Many people today consider themselves spiritual but not religious, and they don't see a need to go to church. In fact, surveys, as you know, show that only about 40% of Catholics remain Catholic into adulthood, and that they don't identify themselves as Catholic anymore, majority of the people. So this is a massive hemorrhage of our faith. And I just felt like it was important to, do what I could to help reverse this trend. So in 2011, I quit my job, walked away, retired early. I took early retirement at age 55, and as soon as I could. And we moved to Culpeper, Virginia, near where our sons went to boarding school, well, our daughter as well. And started giving these presentations at the local parish and our diocese, and then it expanded. I've done, I don't know, maybe 300 or 400 of these talks in a dozen at least dioceses. And like I say, they're multimedia, they're PowerPoint and video based presentations. We include short video clips, which people find very interesting. And some of these have been recorded and are available on the CANA website, canaweb.org. That's CAINAWEB.org. And CMAX TV has recorded them. The link is at the bottom, and you can watch them there. Of course, we're available to come to parishes, schools, conferences, and give these talks as well. And there's 3 purposes for these talks, especially for young people. They help to dispel doubts. For everyone, they strengthen faith. And then I call it equipping the saints. They help equip faithful Catholics with objective reasons to share with others on why we believe what we do. Why do we believe in God, and that sort of thing. So it's been a real journey, and it's going really well. And thanks be to God, we have many people now helping with CANA and to give these presentations. And so, that's that.
So CANA is Catholic Apologetics Institute of North America, and was born out of kind of your personal apostolate that you were already doing, just kind of in an informal way. And now you've formalized that to deal with these challenges. You've got, as you mentioned, the multimedia apologetics presentations. You do some seminars as well, don't you?
Yes, back in 2012, Catholic Distance University found out that I was doing these apologetics presentations, and they wanted to develop an apologetics certificate for their non-credit continuing education apologetics certificate. And so they approached me, and we offered one on the scientific and human evidence of God's existence that was very well attended and extremely well received. And so I've been doing these seminars. They're 3-week long online seminars. People can log on whenever they want to. And there's a discussion blogging component. They read a lecture, watch some videos, and then there's dialogue with the other students in the class as well. So this is worldwide. So people are very interested in this. And we have another one coming up. This is like the 4th or 5th time I've done this one. Proclaiming the Reality of God, Compelling Evidence of God's Existence. That's, again, 3 weeks from June 13th to July 4th. And the cost is $89. You can go to cdu.edu to register for that seminar. So again, these are based on the PowerPoint presentations. And when I did that first one in 2012, I had a whole stack of notes, and the lectures. I converted these speaker notes and the PowerPoint presentations into lectures and text. And I thought, well, shoot, I've almost got a book. So I wrote it up some more. And then my first book, The Reality of God, The Layman's Guide to Scientific Evidence for the Creator, it was published by Tan Books, and it's been doing very well. And that came from the first seminar. And then I did some more on Jesus, salvation, and the church. And that led to my second book, Search No More, The Keys to Truth and Happiness, also published by Tan. And then we did a seminar on suffering. Why would a loving God allow evil, pain, and suffering? And that led to my third book, Catholic Stories of Faith and Hope, How God Brings Good Out of Suffering. So Tan has published an Apologetics trilogy that I have written. And, these are helpful as well as the presentations to help dispel doubts, strengthen faith, and equip the saints.
So these days, it's not very popular to talk about science and faith as though they were on even an equal footing. And of course, Catholics don't really believe that science and faith are equal. Science serves humanity, and faith is the means to eternal life. Can you talk for a few minutes about the scientific evidence of God's existence? Because we do have a lot of, not just atheists, but we've got a lot of agnostics running around today. And to them, the idea that science would actually point to God is inconceivable.
That was a surprise for me too. And I started realizing that there was a lot of compelling evidence for God's existence, scientific evidence, as well as human evidence within human nature. And that, like I say, came from the presentations we were doing with the confirmation students. And then those presentations proclaiming the reality of God, scientific and human evidence of God's existence, they were extremely well received, starting in Dubai and then everywhere else. And so the evidence that we discuss, and it's, again, if you can watch this presentation or read about it in my first book, The Reality of God, the evidence we discuss, the scientific evidence, is 3 things. The Big Bang, from nothing comes nothing. And so if everything came from nothing, then there must be a cause for that. And so there's a lot of compelling evidence, the scientific discovery in the last century that the universe had a beginning, is pretty compelling evidence that there had to be a cause for something that, begins. And the second thing is what convinced me in high school. You don't hear much about it, but God's existence, and that is the laws of nature. E equals mc squared, F equals ma, all these elegant, simple mathematical expressions. Where did they come from? And why do they govern our universe? Why is there this mathematical foundation to our universe? Where did that come from? Why is all this intelligible, understandable by us humans, by our intellect? Monkeys, dolphins, these very intelligent animals, they don't seek to understand E equals mc squared, for example, but humans do. Why is that? Well, it seems that, it's pretty compelling evidence that a creator, a mind, an intelligent mind, created all these laws of nature that are intelligible to us humans so that we could discover God's work in science, in doing science. This harmony and intelligibility that is in the universe is I mean, you have to have an explanation for that, because a Big Bang, it's an explosion. It was an explosion. And when I do this talk, I talk to the students and I ask them, when you play with firecrackers, do they make things nice and neat, or do they make a mess? Do they bring about order and harmony, or is it just a mess? And of course it's a mess. So why is our universe ordered and predictable? Why does the sun rise and sun set, and the seasons come and the seasons go? It's all very ordered, all very predictable, and it's governed by these laws of nature. And then the third thing we discuss is what's called the fine tuning of the universe. About 50 years ago, scientists discovered that there are about 20 of these constants, these numbers in the laws of nature that are set, like the strength of gravity, the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force. All these are set to precisely what is needed for us to be here, for life to exist. If any one of those numbers was just a little bit different, we wouldn't be here. It's like there's 20 dials on the wall, and they've all been set to precisely what is needed for life to exist in our universe. And if there's fine tuning in the universe, that's pretty compelling evidence of a fine tuner that set all those dials. Chance is not a reasonable explanation for that. And then we also look at human evidence of God's existence. Within human nature, there's some pretty compelling evidence of God's existence. For example, our consciousness and these transcendental desires that we have. I mentioned one of them before, this desire for truth, for knowledge. We seek to understand the scientific principles that govern the universe. Well, why is that? Why do humans, only humans, seek to understand these scientific principles? And like I said, that's pointing to God and the ultimate truth, the perfect truth. We desire perfect truth. And to imagine scientists saying that we know everything about everything and we're not going to do science anymore. Well, that's crazy. They know that what they don't know is everything there is to know. Well, how do we know there's more to know than what we already know? Why do we have this awareness of the more? And Father Robert Spitzer talks about this a lot. And so, we humans were desiring perfect truth, perfect knowledge, and that would be God. We also desire perfect love, perfect beauty, perfect justice, or perfect goodness, and perfect home or peace, joy within ourselves. And also our conscience. Why do we have this voice in our head that tells us some things are right and some things are wrong? And we have a free will. We're not programmed by instinct. That's part of our consciousness, the first human evidence. But then we're not really free to do whatever we feel like we can. And we feel under an obligation to do things that are right and avoid things that are wrong. And why is that? Well, again, God is pointing us to himself. He's the ultimate source of justice, perfect justice, and he wants us to be as he is. So these are some of the things I talk about in the first book, The Reality of God, and we cover also in this seminar that's coming up on July 13th, CDU, Catholic Distance University, Proclaiming the Reality of God, Compelling Evidence of God's Existence.
Well, wonderful overview. And I've always looked at just the mere consciousness of humanity compared to other animals. Anybody that would say that we're just animals, really, we're no different. I mean, it's clear that if you say the chimpanzees are very much like us, okay, well, where in their brain do we find consciousness? The animal that knows that he knows. We're completely unique in that.
Absolutely. They're human nature. And one thing that people have confusion about is evolution and Charles Darwin's theory. And the Catholic Church has no problem with the concept that God could have used evolutionary processes over millions of years to create our bodies. But we weren't really human until, like Michelangelo showed on the Sistine Chapel, that he put that soul into that very first human beings, Adam and Eve, we call them. And that's when and it's interesting to think, people have speculated, could that soul have been imparted into those pre-human, fully formed Homo sapiens after like when they were adults, and all of a sudden they woke up and they're consciously aware? And that's interesting to speculate, but most likely it happened at conception. And then the offspring all had souls as well. given to them at conception. And so eventually all Homo sapiens had souls. And so here we are today. So there is no problem with evolution in the Catholic Church as the formation of our body.
What does love taste like? It tastes like a huge pot of spaghetti sauce, simmering on the stove, made from the best fresh ingredients and tenderly prepared by a 93-year-old Italian mom. Father Dom's mom is famous in the Diocese of Milwaukee for her heavenly spaghetti sauce. Bishops love it. Kids love it. Italians, whether they're from the north or the south of Italy, love it. In fact, Angie Roscioli's sauce is famous in part because it blends old world recipes from both the Calabria and Le Marche regions of Italy, bound together by a secret ingredient. If you love red sauce on spaghetti or any kind of pasta, you're going to love Father Dom's mom's sauce. Get a few bottles for your family right now by going to fatherdoms.com. That's FATHERDOMS.com. St. Thomas talked about Thomas Aquinas talked about some sort of, I think what we call it theistic evolution today. Would that be the closest to what he kind of was envisioning?
Yes, I would say it's also called evolutionary creation. What's interesting, I think it's Genesis 1:23 says, let the earth bring forth all living things, animals and such. And several times it uses that terminology, let the earth bring forth. Well, a lot of people think that sounds like an evolutionary process. He didn't just say zap, I'm going to create the fish, and zap, I'm going to create the elephants and giraffes. He said, let the earth bring forth. So God, over time, using these natural processes, brought forth the life that we see today. And an important concept to understand this is causality. There's 4 types of causes. And if I say to you, who carved the Pieta, Michelangelo or his chisel? Well, I think, the correct answer is both. Michelangelo used his chisel. So Michelangelo was a primary cause. He's the intelligent cause. It's his mind that envisioned that beautiful statue in that rock, but yet he didn't just zap and create it. He had to work at it, and he worked at it with his chisel and hammer. And so the chisel and hammer is not a primary cause, it's a secondary cause. And it's also a natural cause, in that God, that Michelangelo had to understand physics and the mechanics of hitting rocks at certain angles to, be able to create that statue. So there are 4 types of causes, and this is how we Catholics understand evolution, that God is the primary and intelligent cause of evolution and all the evolutionary processes. We talked about the laws of nature and the order and harmony in the universe. Well, this flows into biology as well. And these processes, these natural processes like Darwin discovered, are secondary causes. They're not primary, they're secondary natural causes. And so primary cause, intelligent cause, secondary cause, natural cause. I think that's an important way to understand evolution.
Is there, from all of the study that you've done on this topic of creation and evolution, is there still a place for folks who don't believe in a Darwinian kind of evolution? They don't believe in theistic kind of evolution. They believe, I'll call it the old-fashioned, the simpler view of God created us as we are. There was not this long, mysterious process of mud trying to turn into human beings kind of thing. Is there still room in your mind for that kind of approach in 2022?
The church does not say we have to believe any of these things, but the popes, especially John Paul II and Pope Benedict XVI, they talked a lot about this. And there's quotes in our articles on our website. And basically, the church has no problem with this concept if this is the way God created, like I said, our bodies. But they're not compelling us to believe that. And the problem is, like with a lot of Protestants, if you take the Bible literally, 7 24-hour days and all that, then you end up with conflicts with science. And so then the children, the young people are confused. And so we want to help them understand that faith does not conflict with science. They're in harmony. Like John Paul II said, there's one truth out there, and these are 2 paths to get to that same truth, like wings of an eagle. And so, there's, of course, the church doesn't compel us to believe anything with regard to evolution. They're leaving that up to science, but they have spoken repeatedly that they don't see a problem, conflict between science and faith.
So one of the interesting topics related to this question about human life and God is the reality the Catholics believe in of heaven and hell and our souls, which are created at a point in time by God and which are eternal. He's destined them for the beatific vision. You have really something interesting to say about near-death experiences pointing towards this. And I got to admit, I'm kind of a skeptic when it comes to near-death experiences because you hear people talking about, well, various things, right? But tell us what your opinion on this is.
Yes, Father Robert Spitzer talks a lot about this. We base a lot of what we do, we put it in layman's language on his work. And there are studies, hundreds of studies of thousands of people that have claimed to have near-death experiences, which, as most people know, when they're unconscious, they're clinically dead, most of them, flat EEG, and they have these conscious experiences. They see themselves, they feel like they floated up above, and they see themselves maybe in the operating room. They see the body on the table, but they feel like they're above it, watching and hearing the conversations in the emergency room. And then the tunnel and the light, many people report a lot of these things. But what's most interesting about these studies, these medical studies, is that there are at least 4 lines of evidence that are a lot of people think they're pretty compelling evidence of the validity of near-death experiences and our soul and the afterlife, heaven and hell. The first is this idea, they call it veridical perception, that people, when they're dead, clinically dead, they perceive things that are later verified as being true. And how they could have known this you can't, there's no other way for them to know this except what they're saying, that they saw it when they were dead. And an example is Maria Shu. I believe this was a hospital in Seattle. A patient was brought in unconscious, never, she was not seeing things as she was brought in. And she was resuscitated. And when she woke up, she talked about, what happened in the emergency room. And then she said, oh, by the way, on the 3rd floor, on the opposite side of the hospital, there's a window that has a tennis shoe, a men's tennis shoe on the outside ledge with the right shoelace tucked under the heel. And, the nurses and the doctors were all just incredulous. How could she have known this? If she hadn't been in that room and she was just in recovery, she's reporting this. And she wasn't even put in that room. And what she says is she floated outside her body and saw this tennis shoe. And so they went and looked, and then they found that tennis shoe exactly as she reported it. So there's many cases of this veridical perception, verified perception. Another thing that's very interesting is 80% of people who are blind when they have a near-death experiences report seeing, visual sight, when they're dead, when they're clinically dead during this near-death experience. And this includes people who are born blind. And there's some videos. We have a PowerPoint presentation on this, on near-death experiences, evidence of the soul, that we use some of these videos. And then another one is the changed lives of people afterwards. If these experiences are not real, and a lot of people do dismiss them as lack of oxygen or chemicals in the brain or something like this, the dying brain. Why would blinds see and report accurately what they saw when they're dead? And why would this veridical perception occur? Lack of oxygen doesn't, explain that. And people's lives are totally transformed afterwards, especially those that have a vision of hell. Some people are given most people are given a very pleasant near-death experience, the light, the tunnel, feelings of love, joy, peace. And another thing that they report is meeting relatives. Many times they don't know who these deceased relatives were. They just know they're related to them. But then they go and see in old family photos, well, that's the person that I saw during my near-death experience. And so these four things, the vertical perception, blind people seeing, transformed lives, and meeting previously unknown deceased relatives are what many people think are pretty compelling lines of evidence that explain the validity of near-death experiences. And therefore, we have a rational basis we can share with young people that we do have a soul, and that soul is what floats outside the body and then, lives on after death, like the church teaches, and we're destined for either heaven or hell. And some people have experienced purgatory as well in their visions, experience after near death. So yeah, it's all very interesting and very compelling, and a lot of people find it very fascinating to have and supportive to have this to help build and strengthen their faith.
Yeah, certainly a lot of evidence there that agnostics and atheists would have to dismiss completely if they wanted to pretend that there was no evidence in favor of God and a soul and heaven and hell and so forth. Speaking of kind of hard to explain things, miracles by their very definition are hard or impossible to explain with human reason or science or investigation. And that's the very different definition of a miracle. And some of the miracles that point to God specifically, not just kind of we can't explain something, but actually point to a God, are Eucharistic miracles. And there's a long history of Eucharistic miracles in the church, and not just in previous centuries where it would be kind of hard to determine, but these days where we can look at things under a microscope and we can subject our claims to laboratories and scientists themselves. What can you tell us about Eucharistic miracles in this regard?
Yes, Jeff, it's very fascinating. There have been, like you said, over 100 or more of these Eucharistic miracles in, thousands, at least hundreds of years of church history. One of the first recorded miracle was in Lanciano, Italy, in about 750 AD. A priest who was doubting the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. The Eucharist, after the consecration, actually becomes the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ under the appearance of bread and wine. The substance changes. He had doubts about all this. And as he was doing the consecration, he lifted up the host and it started, it changed into human flesh and started bleeding. And all the people have seen that. And like I say, there's been hundreds of these miracles that have occurred and been reported over the centuries. But very recently, 5 of them that we're aware of have been studied scientifically. And the results are very amazing, to say the least. And they're all very consistent. And today, people put a lot of weight, we've talked about it, on science and scientific evidence. So the fact that God is allowing scientists to, reinforce our faith in this way, the faith in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, is pretty amazing. And what these scientists for these miracles have found is that the transformed host, the consecrated host, becomes human tissue, human heart muscle from the left ventricle. And, under a microscope and stuff, it's very clear that this is a heart muscle tissue. And what's another astounding thing is that they find living white blood cells in this sample that they investigate. And white blood cells die 15 minutes or at least an hour outside of the body. And so here we are, in the case of Lanciano, and most of them are several years later, if not decades or centuries later, that they're still living white blood cells. And what are white blood cells? Well, that has to do with suffering, that this heart tissue is, it's torn, it's segmented, and there's presence of white blood cells that Jesus is showing us. Many people believe how he suffered, how his heart suffered for us during the Passion of the Christ out of love. During the Passion, we see that in the movie, The Passion of the Christ, out of love for us. So, this suffering heart. And another interesting thing is when they test for blood type, like I'm type O and there's all these different types. It's always type AB. And it's interesting that is the same as what they found on the Shroud of Turin, type AB, and the Sudarium of Orvieto, the face cloth that many people believe was used to cover Jesus's face when they took him down from the cross after the crucifixion. And that's in Spain now. And that also tested AB. And, forgeries, you can't explain, this couldn't be explained by a forgery, because how do you keep white blood cells? How would you keep this tissue around for, decades or even centuries, heart tissue, without formaldehyde? People didn't even know about blood types until very recently. So how would they have known to make these the same blood type as the Shroud of Turin and the Sudarium of Orvieto? So we have a very interesting new presentation on this that we developed at the request of our diocese, the Diocese of Arlington. And many people are blown away by this as well. And so again, it strengthens our faith in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. And what I find most compelling or most rewarding, beneficial, I think, about the Eucharist is the saying that was on our oldest son's first communion banner: we are what we eat. So if we become more like Jesus Christ. His grace comes into us, and we are transformed into become, through his grace and power, more like himself through the gift of the Eucharist. So this is a great gift that we've been given in the church, and these Eucharistic miracles help strengthen faith and practice going to Mass and receiving the Eucharist as often as we can.
The other thing that's extraordinary about this blood type, as you mentioned, not only could people of previous ages not have, first of all, they wouldn't have known which blood type to use, and they wouldn't have been able to make it consistent across all these different relics, of course. But it's also an extremely rare blood type. You mentioned you're O, I'm O also. I think that's the most common. AB is pretty rare, and if you think about it, you can kind of expect our Lord probably to have a rare blood type. It's interesting to me that these Eucharistic miracles oftentimes have come during times of doubt. As you mentioned in the first example, the priest who was doubting the real presence. We know that most Catholics today really don't believe in the real presence. So you would expect these kinds of miracles from a God that we claim there is, right? A God of love who desires everyone to spend eternity with him in heaven. You would expect to see, not every day, but still miracles on a regular basis to support the faithful. I've got to ask you though, you've talked a lot about science, we've talked about theology and miracles and philosophy, but to the regular guy in the pew, the regular guy who's out working, trying to make a living, you know who our audience is, Catholic men of America, men in the business world at all levels. Is it important that they know about these things, that they have an opinion about creationism or evolution or Eucharistic miracles? What do you think?
Yes, Jeff, I believe it is. Like I said, I worked over 30 years as an engineer and had many discussions with coworkers, most of whom were atheist or agnostic, and put a lot of weight in science and supposed this conflict between science and faith. And, people have children and grandchildren, many who have left the faith. I run into what I call, there are many Saint Monicas out there today, many parents and grandparents who are very concerned about their children and grandchildren who have left the faith. Again, mostly, especially in the case of men, boys, because of science, this supposed conflict between science and faith. And so I think it is important to be able to be equipped, like I said, to have your faith strengthened, to dispel any doubts that we may have, but also be equipped to share with others why we believe what we believe, especially God's existence, Jesus' divinity, the Eucharist, these sort of things. And so not only with coworkers and friends and neighbors, but especially with our children and grandchildren as they get older. So I think it's very important that men understand these principles.
Tell us about your website again, the web address. Of course, we'll put this into the show notes also, people will be able to find it and we'll link to it. But tell us about your website and what content men will find there when they visit.
Yes, Jeff, it's Catholic Apologetics Institute of North America. That's CANA, CAINA, WEB.org. And we have these presentations are out there, the PowerPoint slides in a PDF file, a lot of videos, links to a lot of different videos. Like I said, you can watch 5 of our talks that have been recorded by CMAX TV. And then when we were back in Dubai in 2019, I spoke to one of the largest audiences ever at a church there on suffering. And that recording, it's not as professional, but it's also on the website. Why would a loving God allow evil, pain, and suffering? There are many articles. There are links to my books there, which can be available at Amazon, Catholic bookstores, Barnes and Noble, any typical Dan Books, the publisher. And then our schedule is out there, as well as bio information on the various people who help with CANA and speakers that we have. And so it's, again, these articles I think people would find very fascinating as well. They're all short articles.
We'll make sure that we link to all of that in the show notes. Where are you on social media if people want to connect with you?
Yes, I'm on Facebook, Hemler, Steve Hemler, in Culpeper, Virginia. And CANA also has a Facebook page, the Catholic Apologetics Institute of North America. And we have over 11,000 people now that are following CANA. And we mostly put up memes and things, but they are related to apologetics, most of them as well. And and I'm also on LinkedIn, as you know. So not Twitter. Haven't done Twitter yet.
Yeah, Twitter is Catholic purgatory at minimum. So yeah. I'm glad you're not there. All right. You mentioned you've got an upcoming apologetics seminar, Proclaiming the Reality of God, Compelling Evidence of God's Existence. Give us a few details about that before we sign off today.
Yes, like I said, these are online seminars. They're asynchronous. People can log on whenever it's convenient to read the lectures, listen to the lectures. A lot of people, there's audio out there, so they can listen to the lectures. Maybe when they're commuting into the office or whatever. There are videos. Many of the videos that we use in our presentations are in this seminar, and very compelling. And like I say, this seminar goes through what I talked about earlier, the scientific evidence of God's existence. That's the first week. The second week is evolution, which the church is teaching on evolution, understanding of evolution and creation. And then the third week is this human evidence of God's existence. Which many people find compelling as well. We also get into the 5 ways of Thomas Aquinas. And it's available for only $89. There is like I said, a blogging component. People talk with each other and dialogue with each other online anytime during that 3-week period. And it starts on June 13th and ends on July 4th. And so they can register. There'll be a link on your site, I'm sure. They can go to cdu.edu, that's Catholic Distance University, and under continuing education, online seminars, they can see this seminar. And this is one of 6 that is part of their continuing education certificate in apologetics, 6 seminars. And so we'll be doing another one starting in August on making the case for Christ. How we can know that Christ was a real historical person, how we can know he's the Son of God, divine and fully human, and how we can know he rose from the dead. That's a key part of our faith, but nobody else has risen from the dead like that. So how can we know that that was actually true? And so this is what we look in the second seminar, Making the Case for Christ. You can also register for that as well. They have a bundle package. You can also get all 6 seminars for a special price right now. So it's a good time to begin this series of 6 seminars. Like I say, the first one is the one coming up in June on Proclaiming the Reality of God, Compelling Evidence of God's Existence.
Steve, thank you for a fantastic conversation. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Jeff, and may God continue to bless you and all your wonderful work.
Thank you. Friends, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Another fantastic interview with a great guy, wonderful Catholic, Apologetics work over at canaweb.org. We will link to everything that we've talked about on the show notes. If you've enjoyed this, please share it with your friends and your family. Post it on all your social media networks. Drop the link to Catholic Men of America for this podcast out in your email. Get it out so we can get lots of folks seeing the wonderful work that Steve is doing. Have a great day. God bless you all. You've been listening to a Catholic Men of America podcast interviewing Steve Hemler of the Catholic Apologetics Institute of North America. You can find them online at canaweb.org. I love Italian food. Who doesn't enjoy pizza and pasta, especially with a rich, delicious tomato-based sauce? But if you're like me, you might be watching your carbs closely and staying away from pasta. You can still enjoy a great sauce like Angie Roscioli's by adding it to some meatballs, or maybe on grilled chicken, or with baked tilapia. This sauce is famous in Milwaukee and is now available online at Fatherdoms.com. Get a few bottles for your family today. Go to FATHERDOMS.com, Fatherdoms.com.
You've been listening to the Catholic Men of America podcast. Catholic Men of America is a professional business fraternity for Catholic men, and membership is free. Join us at CatholicMenofAmerica.com, and you'll benefit from networking and mentorship opportunities, find better employment, learn how to grow your business more quickly, and grow in virtue. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.